let's talk about one of the most divisive films of 2022, Blonde.
Marilyn doesn't exist. When I come out of my dressing room, I'm Norma Jean. I'm still her when the camera's rolling. Marilyn Monroe only exists on the screen.
Written and directed by Australian auteur Andrew Dominik, 15 years after his criminally underappreciated masterpiece, The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, Andrew adapts Joyce Carol Oates' novel of the same name, a fictionalized take on the life and legacy of Marilyn Monroe. Starring the professionally surging Ana de Armas as Marilyn, the movie is a contemplative and harrowing drama, showcasing the grim reality of the silver screen icon's life as a sex symbol during Hollywood's so-called Golden Age. The operative word here being fictionalized in the description of the movie's story. That distinction is crucial in understanding the film's purpose and creative standpoint. It would have been fun to see a movie about the life of Marilyn during the easier parts of her life, and I'm waiting for such a project because although I'm not a huge fan, she always seemed a charismatic person with more interesting qualities than just her ostensibly gorgeous physical attributes.
You said you wanted to grow. Do you feel you have grown?
Well, I hardly know how to answer that since they misinterpret that, meaning
I'm not
in inches or something.
I'm not talking about Well, I find it very stimulating to keep studying and working. But I'm not just generally happy. If I'm generally anything, I guess I'm generally miserable. I try to. Even if I feel like it or not, I'll try to make the effort to make contact with people around me. Yes, because I could easily be alone. It doesn't bother me to be alone. Some people I know, they don't like to be alone. I don't mind it.
But this film acts as an analysis of Hollywood's embarrassing history of disgusting abuse toward women, and having Marilyn as a proxy for those women who endured that type of abuse brings it into focus with incontrovertible punch. The film loosely chronicles Marilyn's life from severely abused orphan to perpetually mistreated adult actress. It's not for the faint of heart. At an endurance-testing 2 hours and 46 minutes, Blonde is an exercise in artistic provocation. It's an explicit commentary on sexual violence, exploitation, and childhood trauma, which garnered the film a rare NC-17 rating, a rating historically viewed as a death knell for any movie's chances at box office success. But the rating only seemed to fuel morbid curiosity. The story began with a young Marilyn, or Norma Jean, being raised by her severely mentally ill mother. The scenes of abuse are disturbing and set the tone. The film's more cynical than blissfully reminiscent. Young Norma Jean never meets her father, an imposing figure even when in absentia.
There are complications in both our lives, you see? When you were born, your father was far away. He's at a great distance even now, and I worry for his safety. But in our hearts, we're wed. We're husband and wife. Though we scorn convention and will not acquiesce to it.
But where is he?
A tragic detail of young Norma Jean's early life, which would go on to torture her for the rest of it, culminating in the heartbreaking conclusion of Marilyn's journey we've all come to lament. The story then transitions to an older Norma Jean, now also known as Marilyn, coming up in Hollywood as a promising young star.
I'll get about $5,000 and Jane Russell gets $100,000. And I'm playing the blonde in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes? That's an insult. I'm gonna hang up now. Goodbye.
Marilyn, wait.
Fuck Marilyn, she's not here.
Where she also experiences the typical horrors of the casting couch, the invasiveness of the paparazzi, and emotionally detached relationships with famously powerful men. Marilyn is seen desperately vying for the affections of a father figure, where she calls her lover's daddy and seeks to build a meaningful connection she's so regularly starved for. Ana de Armas' performance is the focal point, and she doesn't disappoint, with a heavy-hearted and physically taxing portrayal that highlighted the painful experience of being treated like chattel in an unforgivingly chauvinistic industry, somewhat controversial controversially, one of the most recognizable Caucasian faces in the history of cinema was portrayed by a Cuban, and it worked wonderfully. Not only does Anna's casting further the point of the story being a fictional retelling of Marilyn's story, it allows one of Hollywood's most scintillating and burgeoning stars carry on a career landmark afforded by Marilyn's undying legacy, something that Anna made the most of as she turned what is an admittedly contentious story into a necessary and powerful statement. Her accent helps her performance stand out from the slew of other portrayals. It felt like I was watching a side of Marilyn that was behind all of the manufactured sex appeal.
Norma Jean, what were you thinking of?
I wasn't thinking. Maybe I was remembering?
There was a humanistic pull in the stylistic choice. Anna became a unique version of the Platinum Beauty that transcended the whispery, seductive intonation we've all come to know. Anna injects her own perspective and created an alternate version without mawkish idolization. Blonde at times felt like a horror film, shot in eerie monochromatic gloominess and calculated slow motion of voyeuristic leering and traumatic hysteria. One would be excused for confusing it with an Ari Aster project. Director Andrew Dominik didn't shy away from inviting us into the gruesome, the perverse, the accepted bestiality of the times, and the fractured understanding of the concept of the sex symbol. Andrew paints his subjects with alternative technique. The assassination of Jesse James focuses on his killer, Robert Ford.
Well, if you'll pardon my saying so, I guess it is interesting the many ways you and I overlap and whatnot. I mean, you begin with our daddies. Your daddy was a pastor of the New Hope Baptist Church, and my daddy was a pastor of the church in Excelsior Springs. You're the youngest of 3 James boys, and I'm the youngest of 5 Ford boys. Between Charlie and me is another brother, Wilbur here, with 6 letters in his name. And between Frank and you is another brother, Robert, also with 6 letters. And my Christian name is Robert, of course. You have blue eyes, I have blue eyes. You're 5 feet 8 inches tall, I'm 5 feet 8 inches tall. Oh, me, I must have had a list as long as your nightshirt when I was 12, but I seem to have lost some curiosities over the years.
I eat something.
The divisive reaction to Blonde by critics and audiences alike wasn't entirely surprising, but I've fallen in the camp that loves the film for its unflinching artistry. Blonde courts controversy, shamelessly challenges the senses with a fusillade of disturbing but beautifully realized imagery. The story presents the sexual crookedness in agonizing detail, but I didn't find it insensitive. The film is about pain, and the presentation is aptly melancholic and unwavering. The idea that her legacy would be tarnished by such an account of what may have befallen her and others like her is an ironic distortion. This story only cements her legacy, speaks to her character as a strong and successful woman in spite of all of the mistreatment. It's a raw snapshot of the behind-the-scenes misogyny practiced by those in power, and serves a mirror to our current social and cultural landscape. Perhaps you prefer Promising Young Woman or Bombshell, and that's great, but Blonde is my pick for a much more emotionally resonant retrospective and indictment. And Anna gives a more pertinent portrayal of a woman truly enraptured by the manipulative tentacles of sexual idolatry, seemingly inspired by other works like Mommy Dearest, Gia, and Blue Velvet. Blonde digs into the muck, exhumes an ugliness buried, and dissects the overly euphemistic view of Marilyn's legacy. My initial reaction to the film was similar to when I first watched Michael Haneke's Funny Games. Here's the aftermath of our obsession with watching the systematic destruction of another human, and that process is oftentimes a part of figurative coronation of the next sex symbol. We collectively prop and tear down the youthful beauty of whomever we deem worthy of our fleeting but intense worship. Marilyn's desperate need for a father figure reflects our modern generation's zealous hunger for attention and publicity. Andrew psychoanalyzes and ponders with the audience over the side effects of someone capturing the ultimate spotlight when mentally and emotionally vulnerable. Marilyn's predicament becomes an all-too-familiar cautionary tale for the naivete of the pursuit of happiness in a world of superficial adoration. The cinematography, camera work, and all of the little tricks and bells and whistles throughout heightened the experience. I appreciated the experimental style, the switch from black and white to color, the liberal use of different aspect ratios, and the creative use of CGI to emphasize the horrors of the story made everything feel like a hellscape from which there was little reprieve. Much of Marilyn's career revolved around her sexuality. Andrew emphasized this point throughout the movie with wonderful recreations of some of Marilyn's most iconic moments.
Yes, you better keep a lookout.
If Beanstalk catches you again, what's the matter with you anyway?
I'm not very bright, I guess.
I wouldn't say that. Careless, maybe.
No, just dumb. Yeah, you better keep a lookout.
If Beanstalk catches you again, what's the matter with you anyway?
I'm not very bright, I guess.
I wouldn't say that. Careless, maybe.
No, just dumb.
They are meant as juxtapositions. The scenes of torture were then that much more hard-hitting. The musical score by the legendary rock duo Nick Cave and Warren Ellis was an experience all its own. Melancholic synths and tearful piano mixed with mournful strings culminated in a soundtrack that could rival The Great Vangelis in its ability to elevate the material to instant classic status. Nick and Warren have been an understated movie score composing duo since 2005's The Proposition, and all the way up to their work on Netflix's Dahmer. The score haunts and jolts like a horror film. Blonde is a modern classic, flawed but ultimately misunderstood, falsely accused of exploitation when it so clearly stands against it, and will one day realize its deserved status as one of the bravest projects of the early 21st century. The irony behind our culture's obsession with sex, and simultaneously our fear of it, is an overture to Blonde's message. I believe there is a reluctance to appreciate Blonde for its championing a re-examination of Marilyn's iconography from a point of empathy, a view of solemn relatability, a perspective of admiration for traits of her stronger than maybe most knew. And although the presentation is quite challenging, sometimes cinema's most disturbing films teach the most valuable lessons. Blonde gets it's a much easier watch than most of the shit that came out last year. Out of 10.
I love her very much. I've never had a feeling like this.
Shut up. Young lady, you don't fool me one bit.
I'm not trying to, but I bet I could, though.
No, you might convince this jackass that you love him, but you'll never convince me.
That's too bad, because I do love him.
Certainly. For his money.
No, honestly.
Have you got the nerve to stand there and expect me to believe that you don't want to marry my son for his money?
It's true.
Then what do you want to marry him for?
I want to marry him for your money.
There.